When my dad told me he was marrying again, I didn't know what to feel. My mom had passed when I was just a teenager, and for a long time, it was just the two of us. Then, out of nowhere, he introduced me to Julia, a woman so unlike the loud, sunny memory of my mother that I didn't know where to place her. She was quiet, almost too quiet. She had this natural grace, like someone from an old movie. Dark auburn hair that always looked like it caught the light just right, soft pale skin, and green eyes that seemed like they'd seen a lot of sadness, but still held something soft, something deep. She was only 34, just 13 years older than me, and that fact alone made things strange. I was 21, living at home in a quiet Michigan suburb while working 2 jobs to save for college. Dad was in the oil business, always flying out to rigs in North Dakota for weeks at a time. So when he wasn't home, the house got too quiet. And now that Julia had moved in, it was a different kind of quiet, a heavy one, filled with small silences, lingering glances, and unspoken rules. At first, I kept my distance. She wasn't trying to be my mom, and I wasn't looking for another. We'd pass in the hallway and say polite things like, "Morning," or "Dinner's ready," and then go back into our separate worlds. But something about her presence stayed with me. There was this sadness in her, something hidden beneath the way she folded towels perfectly, or the way she sat alone in the backyard with a glass of wine, staring up at the sky like she was waiting for something to fall out of it. I started to notice little things. How she bit her lip when she was thinking. How her voice would go low and soft when she said goodnight. She was beautiful, not in the obvious way, but in a way that lingered, that tugged at you when you weren't looking. I never let my mind go there, not really. But sometimes at night, lying in bed, I'd wonder what she was thinking when she looked at me for just a second too long. Then one night in early December, a storm rolled in, the kind that knocks out power and makes the whole neighborhood go dark and still. Our house lost heat. My dad was gone on another 2-week job. I was in my room, wrapped in blankets, using a small heater I'd bought after the last storm, when I heard a soft knock. I opened the door and saw her standing there barefoot, arms crossed tight over a hoodie, her breath visible in the hallway. "Your room's the only one that's warm," she said. "Would you mind if I just for tonight?" Her voice was shaky and her cheeks were red from the cold. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed that this was a bad idea. But I stepped aside and let her in. She brought a blanket and curled up on the far side of my bed, facing the wall. Stayed on my side, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding so loud I thought she could hear it. We didn't speak for a while, just the sound of the wind against the windows and our quiet breathing. Then, in a low whisper, she asked, "Do you ever feel like no one really sees you?" I turned my head toward her. She was staring at the ceiling now, too. "Like you're living in someone else's life," she continued, "and you're just going through the motions." I didn't know what to say, but something about the way she said it, like it had been building up for years, made my chest ache all the time. I said softly. We lay there for a long moment, breathing in that truth together. Then she turned toward me, her eyes glassy but focused. "Your dad doesn't touch me anymore," she said. "He hasn't, in months, and I keep pretending it doesn't matter." Her voice cracked on that last word, and without thinking, I reached for her hand. Oh, she let me. Her fingers were cold but soft, and she held on tight, like she was afraid to let go. And then it just happened. Slowly, cautiously, like crossing a line we both saw coming but couldn't avoid. She leaned in, her lips brushing mine in. A kiss that felt like surrender. It wasn't wild or desperate. It was gentle, deep. Two people lost in different ways, finding something real for just a moment. I don't know how long it lasted, minutes, hours. But in that bed, in the middle of that storm, she wasn't my stepmother. And I wasn't her stepson. We were just two lonely souls, finally being seen. When I woke up, she was still there, curled into me like we belonged to each other. And I knew. Everything had changed. The morning after that night felt like waking up in someone else's life. The snowstorm outside had calmed to a soft, white stillness, but inside, everything was different. Julia was still lying next to me, her bare shoulder exposed above the blanket, her face turned gently toward mine like she'd never left. For a second, I just watched her breathe. I don't think I'd ever seen anyone look so peaceful and so haunted at the same time. She stirred slowly, her eyes fluttering open, and for a heartbeat, we just stared at each other. No words, just that heavy silence of knowing something had happened, something deep, dangerous, and unforgettable. Then she pulled the blanket up to her chest and sat up without looking at me. "We made a mistake," she whispered, her voice flat but trembling underneath. My stomach dropped. I nodded, even though every part of me screamed that it didn't feel like a mistake. It had felt real, honest, more honest than anything I'd experienced in years. But I didn't argue. I didn't ask her to stay or tell her that last night had meant something to me. She got dressed without another word and slipped out of the room like a secret, quiet, careful, and already trying to pretend it hadn't happened. That whole day felt like walking through fog. I couldn't focus on anything. Every little thing reminded me of her, the way she'd whispered in the dark, the soft moan she let out when I kissed her neck, the way her fingers gripped mine like she was drowning. I felt alive with her, but now I was hollow. Julia avoided me completely. We didn't eat together. We didn't speak. It was like someone had pressed a reset button on the house, and everything had gone back to its usual silence, except now it was louder somehow, heavier. I started sleeping on the couch, staying out late, crashing at my buddy Jordan's place just to be away from the tension. But even with all that space, I couldn't get her out of my head. I kept replaying that night, the look in her eyes, the warmth of her body pressed against mine, the softness in her voice when she said, she felt invisible. She had let me see the part of her she hid from everyone, even my father. And now she was shutting the door on it like it never happened. I didn't blame her. She was his wife. I was his son. It was wrong. We both knew it, but knowing didn't stop the ache. Then came the day that changed everything. About 6 weeks after that night, Julia called me into the kitchen. Her face was pale, her hands wrapped tight around a mug of cold coffee. She didn't meet my eyes. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly. At first, I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My brain froze. But then, just as I opened my mouth to speak, she looked up and added, "It's not your father's." That's when the world cracked open. I sat down slowly, trying to process what she was saying. There was no way it could be anyone else's. She and my dad hadn't been intimate in months. She'd told me that herself. Which meant the baby was mine, my child, growing inside my stepmother. The room spun. My throat went dry. "What are we going to do?" I asked, barely able to hear my own voice. Julia shook her head. "I don't know. Thought about leaving. Just disappearing before it starts to show. But I have nowhere to go. No money, no job, no family." Her voice cracked again, and tears filled her eyes. For the first time in weeks, I saw the woman from that night. The woman who needed someone, who trusted me. Who was now carrying something none of us could take back. I stood up and reached for her hand. "So let me take it." "You won't do this alone," I said. "Whatever happens, I'm here. For you. For the baby." She looked at me like she wanted to believe me, but I could tell she was scared of what this meant, of what it might cost. I offered everything. Help, money, even leaving town together. But she shook her head slowly. "No one can ever know this is yours," she said, barely above a whisper. "Your father would never recover. He'd hate me. He'd hate you. It would destroy him." I wanted to tell her we could find another way. I wanted to tell her we deserved to be honest, to live with the truth. But deep down, I knew she was right. So we made a choice, a silent, gut-wrenching choice that tied us together more than any night ever could. We told my father she was pregnant, ... with his child. He was stunned, of course, confused even, but happy. He hugged her, held her face in his hands, and said things like, "I thought this part of life was behind me, but maybe life's giving me a second chance." Julia forced a smile. I stood there, watching them, pretending to be nothing more than the stepson, while my entire world twisted behind my eyes. And as he kissed her forehead and placed his hand on her stomach, all I could think about was the secret growing inside her, a living, breathing reminder of one night we could never erase. The days after Julia told me she was pregnant felt like living inside a secret I couldn't escape from. Everything around me looked normal on the surface, our house, our routines. Even the way she moved through the kitchen while making coffee, or folding laundry, but underneath, nothing was the same. I knew she was carrying my child, and every little sign, the way she placed her hand on her belly, the way she paused longer in front of the mirror, or how she suddenly avoided certain smells just reminded me of the truth we were burying. My father, completely unaware, had gone from being distant to being almost present. Like this pregnancy had given him a second chance at something he'd lost long ago. He started working from home more, spending time fixing up the nursery, researching baby names. Watching him paint those walls light yellow with a small, hopeful smile on his face nearly broke me. Every time he rubbed Julia's back or talked to her belly like it was his own blood, I felt a knot tighten inside my chest. I wanted to scream the truth, but I couldn't. We had made this choice, and now we had to live inside it. Julia and I didn't talk much. She stayed polite, distant, always careful not to be alone with me too long, like she was afraid of falling again. But there were moments, quiet, stolen ones. Like when we'd pass in the hallway and her fingers would brush mine just for a second. Or when we both found ourselves in the living room late at night, pretending to watch TV, stealing glances in the dark. I could still feel her, still remember the way she looked at me that night in my room, not like a stepmother. Not like someone older, but like a woman who had finally felt wanted. It haunted me. And then came the morning, everything started to crack. I was in the kitchen, half awake, pouring coffee when Julia walked in and froze. Her face had gone pale. She rushed to the sink and vomited. It wasn't just morning sickness, we're shaking. I helped her to a chair, and for a moment our eyes met. No masks, no pretending. Just fear. That afternoon she had a doctor's appointment, and I offered to drive her, but she said my father was taking her. The hours that followed felt like torture. I walked around the house, sat in the nursery, stared at the baby books stacked on the shelf. I kept asking myself, what happens if something goes wrong? What if the truth comes out during some blood test or some complication? Would she lie again? Would I have to? When they finally returned, she looked exhausted. My father smiled, rubbing her shoulder, saying everything looked fine and the baby was healthy. I nodded, pretending I was just the stepson again. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I found her sitting alone in the backyard, wrapped in a blanket. It was cold. She didn't look at me when I sat beside her. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "He talks to the baby now, like he really believes it's his. He wants this so badly." Her voice cracked near the end. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "So do I?" I whispered. She looked at me, then really looked. Her eyes were wet but fierce. Do you just want me?" That question hit me harder than I expected, because the truth was I wanted both. I wanted her, and I wanted that baby to have a real family. I wanted the life we couldn't admit to anyone. But none of it could ever happen without blowing up the world we were pretending to live in. I reached for her hand, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't pull away. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there in silence too. Broken people holding on to something fragile, something real, even if we could only touch it in the dark. I remember thinking, this can't last. Something's going to give. And I was right. Just a few days later, Julia fainted in the kitchen while reaching for a jar in the cupboard. I caught her just in time, but she was pale and dizzy. We rushed to the hospital. My father was out of town again, back on a site in Montana. I sat beside her in that cold watching machines beep and nurses come and go, my heart pounding with panic and guilt. When the doctor finally came in, he said it was stress, that she needed rest, less tension, less worry. I almost laughed. How do you tell a woman carrying her stepson's baby to stress less? When we were finally alone, she broke down. I can't do this, she sobbed, lying every day, pretending, carrying his name while carrying your child. I don't know who I am anymore. I took her hand, kissed her fingers, tried to steady her breathing. We'll figure it out, I said. Right. But even I didn't believe that anymore. The truth was alive, now growing, kicking, pushing its way into the world. And no matter how deep we buried it, it wasn't going to stay hidden forever. Asterisk the following. Weeks felt like we were both drifting through a dream that neither of us had chosen but somehow couldn't wake up from. Julia was starting to show now, just a little, but enough that the way she walked had changed slower, more careful. Her hands always found her belly when she was thinking, like she was unconsciously protecting something precious, something fragile. Every time I saw her do that, it sent a strange ache through me, not just desire or guilt, but something deeper. Something that felt like love. Not the teenage kind of love that fades by morning, but the kind that grows in quiet glances, long silences, and impossible choices. My dad, still glowing from the idea of becoming a father again, started going overboard baby shopping, ordering furniture, reading parenting blogs late into the night. He was like a man reborn, clinging to this idea that a baby would fix everything. And maybe that's what scared me most, because this baby, my baby, was about to blow apart everything he was trying to hold on to. Julia and I still didn't talk much when he was around, but in the late hours when the house went quiet and everyone else was asleep, we found each other again. Some nights she'd come to my room, wordless, barefoot, wearing one of his old shirts, like a ghost walking into my guilt. We never talked about the past or the future. We just touched, gently, slowly, as if touching could freeze time. Those moments were full of heat and heartbreak. There was passion, yes, but also fear, so much fear. Because every kiss, every soft moan, every whispered breath was a reminder that we were building a life in the shadows. I could tell Julia was changing. She was more emotional, more guarded. Some days she'd pull away from me completely, locking herself in the bedroom, not eating, barely speaking. Other days she'd hold my hand for a second too long when no one was looking, like she wanted to scream but couldn't find the words. One afternoon, while my dad was out with friends, I found her in the nursery, standing over the crib he'd built, running her fingers across the white railing. Her eyes were distant. I stepped inside quietly and said, "You okay?" She turned toward me with this heavy sadness in her face. "Do you think we're evil?" she asked. "For doing this, for being this?" I walked over to her and gently placed my hand on her belly. "No," I said. "I think we're just human, okay? And humans make messy choices when they're lost." She leaned into me, and for a few minutes we just stood there, wrapped in something wordless. A connection that went beyond lust or confusion. Was pain, yes, but also belonging. Then came the letter. A plain envelope left on the kitchen counter, addressed to Julia in handwriting I didn't recognize. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. I don't know what made me open it, curiosity, fear, instinct, but inside was a printed photo of us, me and her. In the backyard, one night a few weeks ago, she had her head on my shoulder. My hand was on her knee. Whoever took it had zoomed in just enough to make the moment feel like a confession. My blood ran cold. Along with the photo was a short note typed, "You have 1 week. Tell him the truth. Thor, I will." No name, no return address. Just a warning, a threat. Proof that someone knew. Someone had seen us. My hands shook as I slid the letter back in the envelope. Julia was upstairs, lying down, and I didn't know if I should tell her, but I had to. I walked up slowly, heart pounding, and handed her the envelope. She stared at it, then at me. "What is this?" she asked. "Just open it," I said. When she did, her entire body stiffened. Her face turned white. She looked at me with wide, panicked eyes. "Who took this? Who knows?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I've checked all the cameras around the house. Nothing. Whoever it is, they were watching. They are watching." She sat down hard on the bed, the photo still trembling in her hands. "Oh my God. Oh my God." She kept whispering. I sat beside her. "We need to tell him," I said, "before this gets worse." But she shook her head violently. "No, we don't know who this is. If we say something, it could blow up everything for nothing. What if they're bluffing?" I looked at her hand. I saw fear turn to something else. Resolve. "We wait," she said. "We protect the baby. We pretend everything is fine, till we know who's doing this." I didn't agree, but I didn't fight. Her, not yet. But that night, as I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, one terrifying thought haunted me. Someone was watching. Someone knew our secret. And if we didn't figure out who it was fast, this story wasn't going to end with a baby. It was going to end in ruin. The days that followed were heavy with silence, like the whole house was holding its breath, waiting for the next blow to fall. Julia barely spoke. She moved through the house like a ghost, careful and quiet, her eyes shadowed with fear and exhaustion. I knew she wasn't sleeping. I wasn't either. Every creak in the floorboards, every knock at the door made our hearts race. The envelope with the photo was locked in the back of my desk drawer. But it might as well have been burning in the open. It was always on our minds. The fear of being exposed had pulled us even further into each other in secret ways. We'd meet in the basement or in the car parked down the street, just to breathe together. To remind ourselves that we weren't going crazy, but every kiss now carried panic, every touch a whisper of what if this is the last time. Julia's belly was growing fast. She started wearing baggier clothes, avoiding mirrors. My father still had no clue, still rubbing her stomach with pride, making baby name lists and planning family dinners. Watching him with her felt like betrayal all over again, but worse now, because we were living a double life in front of his face. One night while he was working late, Julia came into my room. She stood there in the dark, looking lost. "I don't want to do this anymore," she said softly. "I don't want to lie. I don't want to pretend this baby isn't yours." I got up and wrapped my arms around her, resting my hands gently on the curve of her belly. "Then let's run," I said. "We can leave tonight. We can go somewhere new. Start over. Just us." She didn't answer right away. Her fingers tangled in mine. She leaned her forehead against my chest and whispered, "I think I love you." And that moment, those 5 words, they changed everything for me. I wasn't just in this because of what happened between us. I wasn't just in it for the baby. I was in it because somehow, through all the guilt and the wrong turns, I had fallen for her. Hard, but just when it felt like we were finally about to make a choice, finally about to break free, everything shattered. It was a Saturday morning. My dad had gone to get groceries and Julia was upstairs resting. I was in the garage looking for a box of old baby clothes he wanted to donate when I saw I-10 envelope taped under the workbench. I pulled it out slowly, heart pounding. Inside were more photos, dozens of them, us in the hallway, us in the backyard. Even one of Julia sneaking out of my room late at night. It wasn't just one moment caught on camera. It was weeks, maybe months of us being watched. And there was another note, this time handwritten in red ink. "Tell him or I will. You have 48 hours. I stumbled back, the walls closing in. This wasn't a bluff. This wasn't a scare tactic. This was real. Someone had been watching us closely, tracking us, and now they were pushing us to the edge. I ran inside, up the stairs, burst into Julia's room, and tossed the envelope on the bed. She stared at the photos with wide, terrified eyes, her hand trembling over her belly. "Who the hell is doing this?" she whispered. I didn't know. A neighbor. A friend. My father himself. Was this all some twisted game? Suddenly, Julia gasped, grabbing her stomach. "Something's wrong," she cried. "It hurts. So, my God, it really hurts." Panic exploded inside me. I scooped her up and drove straight to the hospital, breaking every speed limit on the way. They rushed her in immediately, hooked her to machines, started running tests. I sat in the waiting room, heart racing, mind spinning. Was the baby okay? Was she okay? And then came the moment I didn't expect. A nurse came out and asked for the husband. I stood up automatically, but before I could speak, I heard a familiar voice behind me say, "I'm her husband." My father, standing there, pale and confused. "What happened?" he asked. "Why is she here? What's going on?" I froze. The nurse looked between us, eyebrows raised. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I brought her," I said finally. "She called me. You weren't home." His eyes narrowed. "Why would she call you?" I didn't have an answer. Not one I could give. He stared at me for a long, tense second, then walked past into her room. I wanted to follow. I wanted to see her, to know she was okay. But I couldn't move. Not now. Not with the truth choking me. That night at home was the quietest it had ever been. My father barely looked at me. Julia stayed in bed. The next morning, she came downstairs with a decision in her eyes. "We have to tell him," she said. "He deserves the truth, before someone else shows it to him first." I nodded. My throat was dry. My heart pounding. The secret we'd been keeping for so long was about to come out, and I had no idea what was going to happen when it did. Asterisk. The morning we decided to tell him was cold and gray. Like even the sky knew something was about to break. Julia sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug she wasn't drinking from, her eyes glassy but determined. I stood across from her, pacing, heart pounding so hard it made my chest hurt. Everything we'd been hiding, every secret touch, every late-night whisper, every lie we'd told just to keep breathing it was all about to be dragged into the light. We didn't know how he would react. Would he scream? Leave? Hit me? Would he even believe us? I kept thinking about how excited he'd been about the baby. How he talked to her belly with so much love. How he kept saying this was his second chance at fatherhood. I felt sick, but I knew it had to be done. He came in around 10, wearing that same old flannel jacket, smiling like nothing was wrong, carrying 2 boxes of baby things from the car. When he saw us waiting, his smile faded just a little. "What's going on?" he asked, setting the boxes down. Julia stood first. Her voice shook as she said, "We need to talk." His face tightened. He knew something was wrong instantly. I stepped forward too, but before we could even begin, he raised his hand. "Wait," he said. "Just before anything, let me say something first." Julia and I froze. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Our blood ran cold. "This came in the mail yesterday," he said quietly. "I thought it was just some junk, until I opened it." He laid the photos on the table. Our photos, the same ones from the garage. Every stolen moment, every kiss, every trace of the truth we had buried. "At first," he said slowly, "I thought it was a prank. But then I looked closer." He turned his gaze to Julia, then to me, and I realized I've been blind. The room was silent. I could hear the clock ticking above the stove. My throat burned, but I forced myself to speak. "Dad," I said, "we didn't mean for this to happen. We didn't plan it. It just happened." He stared at me like he didn't recognize who I was. "My wife," he whispered. "My son." Julia stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I am. I never meant to hurt you. I never thought it would go this far. But the baby, it's not yours." His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard I thought it might break. "When?" he asked, his voice hollow. "How long?" I swallowed hard. "It started months ago. When you were working out of town, I didn't expect it, and I hated myself for it at first. But then I realized I loved her." Julia let out a sob, covering her mouth. He looked like a man unraveling, his world collapsing piece by piece. "You loved her," he said, almost laughing, but it was empty. "You slept with the woman I married, the woman I brought into this house, and you loved her." I took a deep breath. Yes, and she loved me back. He turned away, running his hand through his hair. "You're my son," he muttered. "You're supposed to be my son." The silence after that was unbearable. Then finally he turned back, his eyes red but dry. "I'm leaving," he said. "You too can live in this mess you made." "I'm done." He grabbed his keys, walked out the door, and for a long time Julia and I just stood there, numb and silent. When we finally heard the car drive away, she collapsed into my arms, shaking. "We broke him," she cried. I held her tight, whispering, "No, we broke the lie. It had to end." The weeks that followed were a mix of chaos and calm. My father didn't return. He sent a lawyer instead. Divorce papers were filed quickly and quietly. He signed over the house, maybe out of shame, maybe just to be free of the pain. Julia moved into the guest room at first, still grieving what she had lost. But over time, something beautiful started to bloom in the silence. We began building our truth. Not perfect, not clean, but real. When the baby came a girl with soft brown hair and big green eyes, we cried together. She was born in the same hospital where the lie almost cost us everything. And in that delivery room, holding Julia's hand as she brought our daughter into the world, I knew we had paid the price for our mistakes, but we had also earned something honest. We named her Hope, because that's what she was. Not the product of betrayal, but the proof that even in the darkest moments, love can still grow. Even from broken roots.